The Leave Your Legacy podcast is brought to you by Covenant Workplace Solutions. Covenant is a full-service workplace mental health and wellness partner, helping organizations across the country strengthen the lives of their employees and the families they go home to every day. Your employee assistance program should raise the bar, not simply check the box. And Storyline Multimedia. Storyline is an Iowa City-based media company that creates high-quality video, photo, and audio for local businesses. They produce a number of great podcasts, including this one. If you're interested in sharing your story, please contact them at storylinemultimedia.com. And remember, your story matters. Hello, and welcome to the Leave Your Legacy Show. I'm your host, Kenyon Murray. And today we have a very special guest, an author whose book is coming out here next month. And this is Kelly Winegarden Hall, founder of Live Large LLC, a management and consulting coaching firm that focuses on the shift from surviving to thriving in business and in life. One thing about her, she has over 30 years of experience. And there was something about your bio that said, Kelly has been drawn to chaos, which is crazy. Who wants to be drawn into chaos? Uncertainty and struggling businesses with a promise that to her best of her ability, things will happen with you and not to you. So I want to welcome Kelly to the show. How are you doing?
I'm great. Really glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So getting back into it, you and I have a unique history. The fact that we worked at a store that is no longer around, and it was downtown Iowa City at the old Capitol Mall. And I was a young 19-year-old coming into Iowa City, wet behind the ears, didn't know anything. And you probably had to show me the ropes when we were at Athlete's Foot. So
yeah, it's funny to look back at those times because I did love that job. And it was fun that so many of you guys on the basketball team were frequent flyers to the summertime while you were playing summer ball. And it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So after Iowa, so tell us a little bit about what happened when you graduated, where you went, and then we'll get into like you starting your own company and all this great stuff that you're doing around the world.
Yeah, well, I loved being a Hawkeye, and I guess my blood will always run black and gold. But after I finished graduate school, I was working for Frontier Herbs here in Norway, Iowa. And then I got a chance to move to Southern California to work for a mining company called CalMet. And I think I wanted to work at the beach or live at the beach way more than I wanted to work at that company. But it all came together nicely. Right. And I ended up spending 10 years in Southern California. Part of that with them and a lot of that with Avery Dennison. You probably remember Avery labels and Mark slot markers. And so I spent 18 years there between Los Angeles and Cleveland and had a lot of different responsibilities, including 6 very fun years leading a global business from in a big turnaround, and that was a lot of fun. I look back on it and think it's unbelievable that I had the chance to work around the world, traveling about 300,000 miles a year while my kids were tiny, like 4 and 6.
Yeah.
And I don't know how many single moms get the chance to do something like that, but I'm really grateful and blessed. Yeah. And that kind of turned into bigger jobs as time went on. And eventually I left the big multinational corporation to go to a smaller private equity owned company, which was fast and furious and fun. And when that got sold, I thought I might start a chain of plant-based restaurants to save the world, but that didn't happen. Thank goodness, because it was right before COVID. Yeah. Instead, I went to the Netherlands to work in a startup there owned by a chemical company and the founders of a new technology to make things recyclable. So they taught me a lot about the circular economy, and we had a very interesting organizational structure, which is covered well in my book. Yeah. And after that, when my contract ended, I came back to Iowa, and now I'm living among family and friends again.
That's awesome. You know, the one thing I've talked to people a lot too since COVID happened. Like you see more and more people going into entrepreneurship. You know, starting their own businesses and things like that. So where did Live Large come from? I mean, obviously you got a lot of experience. You've traveled the world. So where was that inspiration to start that company?
Well, when I came back to the U.S., I did love the work in the Netherlands and the team, but I also had a stage 4 metastatic cancer diagnosis, and it was palliative. So no surgery, no chemo, no radiation, just made sense to come home and spend the rest of my life around family and leave my stuff to them.
Right.
But then when I started getting healthier and feeling better, I was looking around to say, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? Yeah. And I just realized something that leveraged my favorite parts of my business experience and could help others.
Yeah.
I would like to leave the world better than I find it. And so I started Live Large to help people who are struggling to have a much better time at work. And then
Yeah.
that kind of led to the stories in my book, which are all about using my own experiences, all of them, for better or for worse, to try to help other people have a much better time.
Yeah. And I love that because I think that's one of the things that the world needs right now. It's like there's so much chaos, there's so much division, there's all these negative things going on. And the fact that you are inspired to help other people, like that's the one thing I hope we get back to, is that, you know, being there for someone as opposed to against someone. And so I think that's one, it's really brave, but you said you stage 4.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, so what do you give to your recovery, your health? Like what, I mean, you said no chemo, no surgery. What'd you do?
Yeah, well, there is one pretty cool drug from Novartis that wasn't around the first time I had cancer, and it's called Kisqali, and it's a chemo class of drugs. It's in a pill form, and I take it for 21 days on and 7 days off. But I would really credit most of my healing from an ambitious effort to get rid of every source of dis-ease in my body and my life. And so I learned a lot about meditation, and I drink a lot of celery juice to calm the inflammation in my body and cleanse my liver. And I, the first time I had cancer, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't want my kids to think their mom was going to die.
Yeah.
But the second time when it came back and it was so much more serious, I turned to my global community and a few Facebook videos and stuff, and I just said, let me know what's going on no matter where it is. And if it sounded reasonable or sounded like it could do no harm, I tried it.
Yeah.
A photo healer in Tenerife, Spain, and a prayer group in Australia. I mean, I was really willing to try anything.
Yeah.
But I think that the meditations, the work I've done with meditations and even a few psychedelic journeys have all been really helpful because it helped me find it's just a worthy cause to get back to your grace and to let go of the things that are hurting you and hurting others.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I mean, honestly, just sitting here and hearing that, it's like, it gives me goosebumps because my wife is kind of on that same kind of journey of meditation. She's like doing a lot of yoga retreats and all this kind of stuff,
yeah.
but she's really getting into it. But you talk about coming back here because family's here. Did being closer to your family, did that help as well when you talked about recovery and support and those kind of things?
Oh, for sure. I mean, you can find a lot of love everywhere you go, but there's no place like home.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's just something about Iowa.
And I have a very big family. So, well, the pace of life is good here. You know, I know we're all struggling right now with inflation and things being less affordable, but believe me, they're more affordable here than they are in most other places you're going to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I know you and I were just talking, you're in New York, so I know how expensive things are there.
Yeah.
And on the West Coast where I've got a couple kids too. So, but yeah, Iowa's Iowa. I mean, there's just something about this place. It's funny because I tell people, where are you from? I'm from Iowa. They're like, first of all, they say, there are black people in Iowa? I'm like, yeah, there's black people in Iowa. But there's just a certain pace about it. There's a certain, they talk about that Iowa nice too. And I really think that's a thing. So so glad to hear that your family, is that you guys are that close because in the end, family's what we got. And the fact that you have a good family and a close family, your kids are thriving, those are all things that we can never, I think sometimes we take it for granted that we have that, but it looks like you definitely embrace that family and the love and support that they give you here. So
yeah, every time I'm flying back here, because I do still travel a ton and explore, and my work is not usually here, but I always say, I'm going back to the heart of the heartland. And I worried a little bit with my kids not being raised in Iowa that they might not want to visit as much and might not come, but they're here constantly.
Yeah.
And Caitlin Clark helped with that
because
really? My daughter's at Ohio State and she loves basketball. So she was here for the game where Caitlin beat Pete Maravich's record. And,
oh, man.
And it's not that hard to get them back here when things like that are here to be found.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, more importantly, you got a book coming out.
I do.
Your book is called Love Works, Transforming the Workplace with Purpose and Authenticity. Okay, first of all, I know we had a lot of experience, but tell us about the title and really, if someone saw that, like, what can they expect from the book?
They can expect to share a journey through 20 stories from my life And some are happy stories and some are sad stories and some are gritty and some are fun. So you should expect to laugh and cry. I think most adults have one thing in common. We're going to spend more of our waking hours working than any other single activity in our adult healthy years. And it should be way better than it is right now for most people. We're watching a climate where the 1% gets bigger and bigger and more powerful. And I don't want to see anybody left behind because we have a responsibility when we are leading companies and active in our communities to take care of the people in our care and to make communities stronger and to use our abundance and use our time at work to provide great services. But we get to do it through caring and loving for our employees. And when we love them, they love our customers. And when happy employees and happy customers are doing their thing, we happen to have happy investors and happy communities too.
So what I'm thinking too, like one of the things I talk about is like culture building. Is that one of the things when you come into a situation where you're coming in to help a struggling company, is that one of the first things you look at? Because culture means so much, whether it's retaining people or even recruiting people into that company. Like, is that something that you really focus on starting out?
Absolutely. I'd kind of call myself a culture curator.
Okay.
And even in the 5 years that I got to work with the team in the Netherlands where we adopted a self-directed structure, I gave up my power to them so that people were recognized as adults having 24 hours a day. And we got to choose our own titles. And so I preferred head coach over managing director or CEO every day of the week. And it was just a pleasure to see what happened when we sort of gave people back their respect, their status, their effort, got rid of the word delegation because that subordinates people from the get-go.
Mm-hmm.
And instead we said, let's enroll each other in the things that need to be done. Let's work in teams. And if diverse teams have the psychologically safe spaces to do their best, there are days when people just get crazy. They fight over the things they believe in. They make messes. And the name of the game isn't to be perfect, and it's not to ever be mad or upset. It's to give people the space to be themselves and learn to fix it when it goes wrong.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, you use the words love and work in the same sentence, and people will raise eyebrows. So what does love mean to you inside of an organization?
I spend a lot of time in the early parts of the book framing love because it's such a loaded word. I mean, my own relationship with love for many years was, it was finite, it ended, it was a ticking time bomb. Like if you're lucky enough to find it, good luck keeping your hands on it.
Right.
And that's actually not the case at all. I've now come to believe that we're spiritual beings having a human experience and not humans having a spiritual experience. And that spirit that we share is pure, abundant love at its core. We're supposed to be here having a good time. We're supposed to be here enjoying the earth's resources. We're supposed to be trading our gifts and trading our time for money so we can spend it on other people's gifts, like chefs and artists and musicians. And everybody should be able to participate in both in a healthy way. Participate in the work because it takes work to have great communities, but participate in the play and spend the money that you earn on more things than food, clothing, and shelter.
Yeah, well, you talked about you're in the Netherlands, and I lived in Sweden for a year, and there's just a different way that they approach work. And I was in Sweden 26 years ago. So what was a big difference? You talk about a little bit like the difference of working there, because I think it was something like they start with like 25
days of
vacation, right? Like that's just crazy for anybody here to even think about it. So what was that like, kind of adjusting your mindset to how they worked over there?
Well, that was a pleasure. It was a little hard at first because they really do kind of work 9 to 5 hours. And even when I first got there and was looking for an apartment with my husband at the time, we had to go during the day to take a day off of work because realtors don't work nights and weekends.
Oh, wow.
I mean, can you imagine?
That's crazy. Yeah.
And so there's just a whole different respect for time. There's a different respect for work. There's a different respect for holidays and leisure. And it's very common for people to take 2 or 3 week vacations every single year. The school schedule is wrapped around it. The culture supports it. In fact, there's a policy at the company I was working at that you can't ask a single person to take less than 2 weeks of vacation at a time. And
at a time?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They could take less, but you couldn't ask them to take less.
Gotcha. Okay.
And the nice thing about that is they really do get the same amount of work done in a year. They just do it differently. They kind of surge and are extremely productive when they're working, and then they have proper rest. They nourish themselves well. They spend time outside. They live in smaller spaces. They don't have as many credit cards and heavy debt. They
Yeah.
use debit cards. They don't spend money they don't have.
Yeah.
And they live in smaller spaces, so they spend more time outdoors. They ride their bikes to work and public transit. They care a lot about the environment.
Yeah.
I wrote an article on LinkedIn before the last election
Mm-hmm.
that said 12 things the U.S. can learn from the Netherlands before the last one.
Yeah.
And they pay higher taxes than we do, but they just get a lot more support from their policies and their the engagement between their government and their businesses.
Yeah.
And I would love to see that here, because when I actually added up all the taxes that I pay
Mm-hmm.
between federal taxes, state taxes, local taxes, sales taxes,
Mhm.
property taxes, how many other taxes do we have? I pay the same amount of taxes, but then you also have to add your health insurance premiums and your tuition for your education and your student loans. It's not that way there.
Wow.
It's entirely different. Yes, they pay high taxes, but they have a lot more support from their government
Yep.
and their communities. And for the 10 or 12% of every single country that has a rough time, they expect it. They hold those people. We seem to want to erase them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a lot of the same philosophy I saw in Sweden too, with as far as like the support and things like that. Because it just kind of blew my mind when we started talking about things. Because even like the universal healthcare, right? Like when they, like I remember had a friend rolled an ankle. They're Swedish citizen, but they go to the hospital. I was like, man, like I'm thinking like, how much is it going to cost, right? He's like, oh no, the government takes care of it. I mean, I think there's some benefits in that. We could learn some different things, especially when it comes to healthcare. But I think that would be a shock to the system going there, but then coming back and living here, it's another shock coming back. So because you were there for 5 years, correct?
Yeah, I have a similar story. Like after my diagnosis, I kept working there. I made a decision that I wanted to spend the rest of my life doing things I love with people I love, and that included work. I mean, I really love them. I still do. I'm going to see them in a couple of weeks when I do a release party there. But I remember having to find ways to get my blood work done in the U.S. to send it to my hospital in Cleveland, and it was quite a bunch of crazy to figure that out. But I got some help, and I went to the doctor to get a blood draw, and they were like, "Oh man, you have U.S. insurance. Like you're gonna have to pay out of pocket for your blood draw today." And I was like, "Oh shoot! Like how much is that going to be?" And they go, "Really?" They like hesitated to tell me, and they said 85 euros, and I was like, no problem.
Yeah.
I'll pay cash.
Okay, what's the conversion?
It would have been like $100.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
I mean, here that would have been a $1,200 blood test.
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's so quiet. That's so crazy. Well, one of the things you prioritize, you said you have to prioritize. Says if you have to prioritize the single most important thing, it's a loving leader. So what's a loving leader?
A loving leader is someone who puts a lot of intention into the way that they're approaching the people around them. They provide psychologically safe spaces. They provide good feedback. They are taking time to understand how things are being done as much as what needs to be done. I think it's really, there's a lot of ideas sprinkled throughout the book, but I think loving leaders, they make the purpose and the mission very clear. They tie every single individual's goals to the work. They hold them responsible for outcomes, not hours. And they have they earn trust by doing things like maximum transparency and encouraging everybody to be a part of the dialogue. And let's just say, for example, that you needed to create a policy. Right now, pretty much every company is talking about hybrid work. Should you go back to work full time? Should you trust people to work from home after COVID? And the reality is, I think a loving leader sits with the other adults that they work with, and they say, what works for our team? What works for the work we have to do? What is the best way we serve our customers and get our products to market? And let the adults talk. Let them tell you how policies and changes affect them, because everybody does want to do a great job and make a contribution. I'm convinced of it.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thought process of like, this is what we're doing, no ifs, ands, or buts. We're doing it this way. And, being in that situation or feeling, it's like, okay, well, now you are demanding that I do this, which is maybe completely different from what I did before. And there comes with a lot of angst there, right? Like it's like, and people start to feel like they're not appreciated because it's like it was working this way, but now you want to change it based on whatever formula that you decide to do. But to have someone say, like you said, sit down with them and talk about them, like everybody wants to feel part of something. And you use the word coach.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what, I understand as a coach, like when everybody feels like they're involved and whatever they accomplish, they did it together. Like that's where you get teams or whatever to go above and beyond. And then it's like they're there to support each other. So I just think that's a very unique way that, most businesses here don't work, but in your experience, it seems to work out pretty well.
Yeah, I've experienced it all myself. You know what it's like when you're working for a company and people are going into that room by themselves. The big people are going into those rooms and they're making decisions about you or about the company or about others. And a lot of people would say that restructurings and layoffs are these big, bold decisions that leaders have to make. And I'm like, well, I actually think there's much better ways to handle tough times, to involve people in bringing all the creativity that's in the room to bear and letting people make good decisions for them when times are tough. If you think back to the global financial crisis or any tough times lately, you'll see some companies that'll lay off 1,000 loyal workers, and what are they supposed to do to feed their families and pay for school and put gas in the tank? Meanwhile, other companies will have more. Everyone will take a haircut, and the entire workforce will take a 20% reduction in pay or work part-time for a couple of years to give back to the greater good so that all those people keep their jobs and stay engaged for the short term, because economies always come back. It always turns around, and tough times don't last, but tough people do.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of those are like very reactionary, very drastic, and it's just a shock to the system. And some companies don't recover from doing those kind of things either.
No.
I mean, you create this air of, we can't trust you. We can't trust leadership. And I know that is very demoralizing when it comes to the people that are boots on the ground doing the grinding every day. For me, I just think like there's so many things that we can learn here in the United States from other countries, because at times you feel like we're just in a mess here when it comes to that. So.
Yeah, and it's kind of getting worse. I mean, show me a single human who does their best work when they're in fear or when they feel anxiety or when they're worried about losing their job or worried about not paying a bill or about having to go to the hospital without great insurance. Like, show me a single person in the whole world who plays their best game or does their best project or is at their most creative when they have pervasive fear and anxiety in their life.
Right.
And now we have contempt because we have people like living in a world where the politics are absolutely crazy. And we just lived through this cycle where anytime you have 50 people in the room, probably 15 of them voted one way and 15 voted the other, and 15 probably didn't vote at all, and 5 voted for someone else. And it's sort of like now we're holding all of that tension inside of teams and inside of buildings. And I just like to stop and remind people that no matter what you believe about politics, you're a human, and that person to your left and that person to your right has 995 other things you can love about them.
Yeah.
So let's get back to the stuff that we actually have in common and the stuff that really matters on a day-to-day basis.
Well, yeah, I mean, as humans, we have to be right or wrong most times. And so sometimes perspective and then even accepting someone else's perspective is hard for us. And there's all these other factors that go into it. But you're right. Like, we have to be able to create loving cultures where we support each other. And that's, I think, here in the States, we have a long way to go when it comes to that, especially from corporate America. But there's one thing I saw, too. You talked about there's 3 words, okay? And I'm going to quote you. It says, "Beyond a shadow of a doubt, I now know that capitalism, trust, and love are 3 incredibly powerful forces in our world. It may sound strange to put capitalism next to the values of trust and love." What have you experienced in your career that's allowed you to make that conclusion?
Well, I've had the good fortune of working with one team after another where no matter what situation we started in, what kind of mess was there from anything that had gone wrong where the company wasn't performing at its best, I found that when we brought people to the table to talk about what they saw, where the opportunities were, where the pain was, what we needed to do to go from 100 projects to 3, or to rebalance resources, or to reconnect people, or soothe the pain, or restore trust. Like, whatever the challenge was, when people got the chance to reconnect, put their hands on each other's backs, and go after something we all wanted for the world and for ourselves, the capacity people had to rise and shine and do whatever it took was every single time easy to behold.
Wow.
No matter what situation you're starting in, whether you're in a tough relationship, or you're having a tough time at work, or you're having a trouble with your health, we're here to have a good time. Our bodies are miraculous self-healing machines. Our ideas are to be shared. Our talents are to be treasured. And the more that we get to be in places and spaces where people bring out the best in each other, and where you're supported on your bad days, you have that safe space to be yourself and to give and give and give, you get and get and get in even higher returns.
Wow, that's awesome. Never thought of that. That was when I read that, it was kind of interesting. I was like, I can't wait to hear what you say about
And you know what it's like. I mean, I think every one of us has had a coach or a mentor or a teacher or a boss that just did the little things that really made you feel seen and heard and cared for. One of the people that is endorser of my book, her name is Margaret, and she was one of my bosses when I was very young. And when we would she tossed out impossible challenges, like set really high goals. But then when we met them, we partied like rock stars. Like,
That's awesome.
I remember going golfing at the Silverado Resort in Napa and drinking great wine in the cellar there and having a good time, because we celebrated the big and small wins. And on a little day, like let's just say I had to work really late one night to get a budget done or a forecast revised, I would find a card on my chair with a personal handwritten note and $100 saying, I know you were here late last night.
Wow.
Have a meal with your husband on me.
Yeah.
And it takes the littlest things to make somebody feel treasured and appreciated. And we need a lot more of that.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. I didn't have bosses like that, so you're very lucky.
Well, if you don't have one, you could always be one.
Yeah. Trying to do that. Yeah, exactly. I'm in that mode now. Well, this is really one of the things you said. You also present the idea of pinnacle of our power. So tell our audience a little bit about that.
Okay, this is a fun story because one of my dear friends who's here from Iowa City, but he's been living in Washington, D.C. a long time, his name is Sean Kennedy, and he came over to my house for New Year's Eve a couple years ago, and we were each going around the table talking about what we were grateful for. And he had turned 60, and he was saying, I'm really grateful that I am at the pinnacle of my power. And, at this point in my life, I have this much experience and this much knowledge, and I still have my health, and I still have the capacity and the inspiration to solve big problems. And I've just never felt more comfortable in my own skin and more ready to give back. And then I thought about that. I think all of us that night grabbed our phones to take a note about that, because it was such a big idea.
Yeah.
But the more that I sat with it, I kind of realized every single day, whether you're a 5-year-old or a 55-year-old or an 85-year-old, that day you know as much as you're going to know about everything. And you're the best you're going to be that day when you have the right environment and the right support around you.
Yeah.
And so it's helped me to look at people differently, to say, where are you at in your power today?
Yeah. And that's one of the things I was thinking. So one of the things, like in life coaching, we talk about meet people where they are.
Yeah.
Too. That's a big thing we use, because sometimes, even though you may be the same age, based on what you were just talking about, my experiences and things like that put me in one place, but maybe that other person hasn't had the same experiences. And so you have to be able to have empathy for that person that's there and try to meet them where they are. And I think that's a human quality that I've really tried to embrace with myself, because I think there's times where I know in my ego phase, times where I was very selfish, and I've talked about a lot on the show, just the journey I've been on spiritually, almost getting divorced in 2019 and those kind of things. And so it's put me in a position to really try to meet people where they are. Not everybody's always ready for that. And you have to be willing to, if they're not ready to receive what you're trying to give, you have to be able to respect that as well.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm thinking right now is we're always learning. We're never at our capacity.
Right.
We're never at our full potential. In fact, I've heard some stories that our subconscious programming and our creative capacity is only 3 to 5% of the infinite possibilities that are out there to solve any problem or to have any relationship improvement or to live your best life.
Yeah.
You have no idea how many things are possible out there in the universe, and you don't have to do everything all by yourself.
Yeah.
And so, one of the things I've been studying lately is the differences between men and women. And it's been fascinating because I'm like, what? I'm 51 years old. I've started dating again recently.
Yeah.
And all these books have been coming my way. I'm reading about female and male brains, and I'm reading about just the different ways that men and women make decisions and relate and prioritize. And there's this book by, I think, Alison Armstrong, and she says, hey, women, I need to let you know that men are not hairy women. They don't think like we do. But if you understand how men think and you understand how women think, and there's nothing stopping us from having these beautiful partnerships between men and women at work, at home, at school. It should be better than it is, but it's only going to get better when we talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And communication is a key, definitely a key. Well, that's a great segue because one of the things I want to ask you about is like with the DEI thing that's going on. So as a female leader, what do you have for executives facing those decisions around DEI? Because I think they get negative connotations. I think having worked within corporations doing some different coaching things, most people when they hear DEI or see DEI, they're thinking, race, religion, like those kind of things. But DEI also talks about like experiences, like you said, knowledge, those kind of things. Like there's things that I feel are all encompassing in DEI when most people just look on the surface and it's about what you look like or who you pray to. And so, just tell us a little bit like what advice would you give executives facing those kind of decisions nowadays?
All right. Big loaded topic for the moment, but I guess at the heart of it, I would like to see a world where the factories and the offices look like the communities they're situated in. And so for me, getting a company just right says, look around at the demographics of the people that live where your factories are and where your offices are and understand the mix of talent there. And then check the rosters for how your factory is staffed and your offices are staffed. And does it look like your community?
Right.
If it really should, because if we don't have enough ready people in your community because there aren't enough women ready for the jobs or enough minorities ready for the jobs or we're not lifting all socioeconomic classes, you got to look around because as a leader of any organization or of any company, you have a chance to change lives and you have a chance to improve the communities that people are living in and not stripping them for your own wealth. So, I really think that that's the ultimate test. Does your factory, does your office look like the community you live in? And if it doesn't, what are you doing about it?
Right. Oh, man. So this is on a very, very small scale in this. So I'm a trustee for Junior Achievement, Eastern Iowa. And we were having a board meeting. And one of the things we were talking about was how do we increase our volunteerism? And so I'm sitting around the table. I'm one of two minorities that are on the board. But everybody else is very successful. You have bank presidents and things like that. And so even though everybody around the table is really doing a good job of volunteering when they need to, but we're still struggling to get more volunteers. And as I was listening, I was like, how many kids, when you walk into a classroom of fourth or fifth graders, and you're a bank president, you walk in, you got a suit, you got a tie on, those kind of things. You're white, which, depending on the classroom, I go, those kids don't see themselves in you at this point. So my suggestion was, why not, like, how many of you guys started as a teller and worked your way up? Why not invite your employees who maybe are at started where you started, but you're able to show them and they're able to tell these kids about their, how they got into this role and then how they've progressed up. And the fact that that's where you started and you became a bank president, like whoever we're talking to, whoever we're working with, they have to see themselves in you.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of those things too, when you talk about the community and how is it made up, like those are just things that you want to see. You want to see yourself in those positions. You want to see that, you want to have that you want to have that hope that you can also aspire to be whatever you can be. And so I think that's really important too, is that this next generation, they see themselves in us. And then I think that's another way where we can connect and really help our community.
Yeah. I'm always grateful for the weirdest things. Like when things really go wrong, it's sort of almost always a stepping stone to the next plateau in my life, at least. Probably true for every human. But during all the Black Lives Matter riots in the United States, I had made this big assumption that it was easier to be Black in Europe. And so I had been on a crusade fighting for women in business of, just women, period. No, not white women, but women in general. Yeah. And so I had already done a lot of work in my own teams. Anytime that we had a job open, when we got candidates for the job, we were always looking for a candidate slate of 16 people. And I insisted that half of them were women. And so that was going really well, that we had a lot more women. And our team was like 44% women. Okay. And that's chemists and engineers and like really, really talented people. So I was really proud of that. And then I looked around and there just really weren't very many Black or brown people. And I was like, what's going on here? And so I asked one of my favorite people there who happened to be Black. I said, hey, I'm really curious what it's like to be Black in Europe. And so she's like, oh, honey, like we need to have a coffee. And I was like, I'll do better than that. I'll have you over to my apartment for a borrel, which is like happy hour in the Netherlands. Okay. And she came over and she made me cry. Really? When I heard the stories of how she was treated. And she was like, Kelly, like part of the reason people don't even apply for jobs is because they don't expect to like the way they feel in those environments. Wow. And like, that's really sad because I looked around, we didn't have a lot of applicants. We'd have 95, 100 people applying for jobs because this was one of the coolest up and coming circular economy ventures there was. Yeah. And we had a lot of interest from candidates, even though it was a startup, but they weren't applying. And I was like, this is one of the best employers in the Netherlands, the chemical company that had funded us. And I was like, why aren't people applying for the great jobs? There's always jobs open. And she said, a lot of them aren't comfortable working there. They want to know they're going to be comfortable and respected and supported and talking the way they like to talk and celebrating the things they like to celebrate and not having to just act like everyone else. Yeah. And I was like, that was so insightful to me, Yeah. It should be better. You should be able to be yourself wherever you go. That's what psychological safety is. Yeah. Well, did she give you any insight as to why she applied there and why she was working there? Was there something different about maybe her upbringing or anything like that? She had a white husband, a Dutch husband. Okay. But they had children together. And she had never been allowed in his family's home. She had never been welcome and her kids had never met their grandparents. Wow. But she was a tough cookie and really good at what she did. And she knew she belonged there. It was just tragic to hear what the poor woman had been through because she was amazing and nobody deserves to be treated like that. Wow. Well, that's very telling too. And I think, there's so many good things about living here. There's so many great things about living there, but there's still the same struggle. For all of us. Yeah. I mean, I recently was, someone approached me about a job and they were calling and making extra phone calls to make sure I was willing to relocate and then I would be up for that. And everything was looking good. And then all of a sudden they're like, well, you'll have to resign your board positions. And I was like, no can do. Oh. Why would I do that? First of all, that's never been a conflict with the work I've done. I've been on these boards for more than 5 years. I really love the people and the companies and the opportunity. And I represent women on boards and we need a lot more of them. And so I stand for that. And you asking me not to do that is really strange to me. So I asked them to reconsider and they said, no, policy is a policy. I'm like, but the people above me can be on boards and the board members can be on boards. And we're all adults in our 50s. Like, you're telling me you're going to subordinate me in the interview process. I was like, I absolutely don't belong there. Right. That's not the climate you want yourself in and that kind of stuff. There's no growth there. It's just stifling. Something like that. So. I mean, I knew I would have loved that work. Yeah. But I really care about these things. I really care about equality and I really care about adults being respected for the 24 hours a day we share. Yeah. You walk the walk. I try to. That's awesome. That's awesome. All right. So, greatest challenge for you personally when adopting a self-organized structure? Well, giving up my own decision-making rights because I love being a part of problem solving and I love having answers and I love making decisions. And so when we started having teams and giving them back the responsibility and the opportunity to create, we used consent more than consensus because you don't have to have 100% buy-in, but you have to declare someone the decision maker and then they have to do the work to understand where the dissent is and what all the ideas are and what the possibilities look like and do the right analysis and assessment. And we had a good example that's in the book of a team that needed to figure out whether they were going to put a production facility in the north or the south of the Netherlands. And they both wanted it in both places, and they were really strongly opinionated about it. Little did I know that there had been some things that had happened in the company way before I ever got there where someone had lost employees and stuff to another facility. So there was some, raw nerves. And I was just watching them go through this process, and I knew what I thought the right thing to do looked like. Yeah. The numbers were pretty clear about what was in the team's best interest, the company's best interest, but they weren't all on board and they wanted me to make the decision. And I said, well, I know what I would do, but I'm going to give you guys 6 more weeks and your coach to help you get through another layer of pain, get through another layer of dialogue, get through another layer of assessment. And if at the end of 6 weeks you guys can't make a decision, then I'll step in. But I really want you to take the chance to try. And they did make a decision and they did create consent and they did get behind it. And then when it came to implementing that decision, they owned it. They owned it for better or worse. They learned through it. They did the hard stuff. They had a completely different relationship with that program than if it had come down from me. Yeah. And so and then when the next big decision had to be made, they had the skills to do it. And so I wanted to, and I was happy to, and I would have in the past. Yeah. But that deep respect for the power of teams versus the power of me was game-changing for me personally.
Absolutely. I mean, you empowered them to do that. You gave them the time to be able to kind of work through it. And sometimes we don't do that. It's maybe we think in that moment the easiest thing is just to chop, okay, if you want me to make a decision, I'll make a decision. But what you did, it just created an environment where like, okay, one, you trust them. Like that's the one thing I see is like, you did that and you're like saying, I trust you guys that you can work through it and then make the right decision moving forward. But I just think that's beautiful. And I think more leaders need to be able to do that and allow people to work through problems. And, as parents, we like to solve problems, and we like to do it right away. But as a parent of adults like you are, we have to let our kids work through some things too. Even though we want to make that decision or we want things to be good right now, we have to let things play out and let them.
Well, and in smaller businesses or startups it's often we like this idea of being a player coach. We like the idea of being on the field and able to observe the field at the same time. And the truth is, multitasking isn't really real. You can have multiple irons in the fire, but only one of them's hot at a time. Right. And so it was funny. I always kind of prided myself on being a player coach and being able to do a lot of things, a utility player, but you can't play and coach at the same time all that effectively. Yeah, yeah. So giving up that story was a tough one for me because it was actually better for the team when I focused on coaching, even though I love to drop in and shoot a few baskets from time to time.
I love it. That's awesome. All right, so what I do at the end of my show is I always ask a couple questions, and I know I didn't even prepare you for this, but they're easy. Okay. Super easy. Okay. So first one is cookie, pie, or cake. Because we've been talking about serious stuff, so I'm going to get really silly with these. So cookie, pie, or cake, and then what kind?
Oh, goodness. I'm a sugar baby. So just Sunday, a friend brought over that oatmeal cookie pie from Reunion Brewery with the cinnamon ice cream. That might have been the best thing I put in my mouth in a long time.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I love it. All right. Now, you've traveled the world, so you've probably done a ton of this stuff, but do you have a bucket list place you want to go? Where is that?
My bucket list is simple. I want to go to New Zealand and Patagonia internationally and Sedona in Maine in the US. But my next adventure is a dark retreat in Guatemala where I'm going to go to Guatemala for 2 weeks and I'm going to spend 8 of it in the dark.
What?
Yeah. like a full detox, like no phone, no sugar,
Oh,
no
okay,
alcohol.
okay, okay.
It's just 8. I won't even know if it's day or night for 8 days.
Really?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Me and my spirit.
Really?
We're going to get cozy and sit still.
Oh my gosh. I want to get to Guatemala too. I actually have cousins that have been over there for about 25 years doing mission work, starting churches and stuff like that. So yeah. Well, that's awesome. Okay. That's I don't know. I don't know if I know I'm not ready for anything like that. So I had to like wean myself off of things and then try and go do that. But that's awesome. Okay. Last question. If you could have dinner with 3 other people, living or deceased, who would it be and why?
I think at the moment I would like to have dinner with Elon Musk, Donald Trump, and we'll figure out who else we would bring into that table. There's so many people to pick from at the moment, but I would want to have a conversation with them about their power. I really believe hurt people, and these cycles just keep rolling until they don't. And I would like them to pause, just like I'm asking everybody to pause in my book to say, you have all this power. Like, what if you used it to spread your love and not your anger and your punishment? And I will forgive you if you'll forgive whoever hurt you that made you think that you have to screw people to get ahead.
That's powerful. And I've asked that question 24 times, and it's always my grandma or this person. I like that. That is.
I would go right to the middle of the chaos and the crazy,
no doubt. Yeah,
because
right to it.
we can't fix it if we're not willing to start talking.
Yeah,
it's supposed to be good for everybody.
Yeah,
something that I say every time I meditate or every time I try to manifest something, I say, when you're manifesting, always say, or something better, because the possibilities are way bigger than we can ever imagine. But I also say, whatever you give to me, I want for everyone else. Every good thing I want for myself, I want for everyone else. And that's health and peace and prosperity and wealth and kindness and fun and joy and love, lots of love.
Yeah.
And I want them to have it too. But you don't get it by separating people, and you don't get it by calling people animals and rodents and acting like we aren't all migrants in this amazing country. So I think it would be worth a chat. Maybe I'll get that chance someday.
I hope so. Well, tell us about the book. Let's pick this thing up. It's gorgeous. So tell us about the book, like when people can get it, where they can get it. And and you probably have a tour going on. So what's next for you to promote the book?
Well, the book will be live. It's already on Amazon, but as of Tuesday, it's shipping in audiobook, ebook, and hardcover. I did the recording myself at a place like this in Austin, Texas, and that was a fun process. I'm going to have some book release parties starting here at Prairie Lights on the 9th of March, and then I'm going to go to Europe to spend time in London and 3 different places in the Netherlands. So anyone in Europe who follows you can buy it there. We'll see how the distribution unfolds and where it goes, but you can always get a copy from my website, always get a copy from Amazon, and I am very happy to ship it to anybody who needs some help.
Awesome. Now, you're the social media person. Where can people follow you, and what's your website so our audience can kind of check it out? Yeah,
it'll be www.kellywinegardenhall.com, and the information about my company and the book will be on that website. It's being developed right now. So, but I'm on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, pretty much anywhere. Easy to find. Kelly Winegarden Hall.
Awesome. Well, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. It's been great to connect. Like I said, it was so weird when we ran into each other. And you walked in, you're like, you remember me? And I was like, I do, but the name is escaping me. But your spirit is wonderful, and I wish you nothing but success here. I think the book's going to be phenomenal, and I'll finish reading it, and then I'll give my reviews to my fans too. So,
well, thank you for having me, and thank you for everything you're doing to try to leave the world a better place in your own way.
Thank you very much. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today. I'm Kenyon Murray. Until next time, let's keep connecting.